Hey, yesterday I uploaded a video that was about the meta of Recon Rumble Snafu's Small Points event. Now, this time I'm uploading a video about Operation Snafu, which is their main event. And let's go and see what the meta was like there. So, the event itself was 1250 points. But you could only have 12 order dice in the bag. Now, this is important because that really informs what you want to build, doesn't it? It discourages massively horde lists, and it discourages order dice spam lists because you can't really control the enemy with the amount of order dice you have in the bag. You can only control it insofar as you have to have 12 order dice in the bag. For me, that would mean that I would go for a build, I think, where I had 14, maybe 15 order dice in total. I would want, even if I lose a few, I would still want to have 12 order dice in the bag, and I would want a few units that could do nothing, that I didn't need to put in the bag at all at any point. So units that could sit in transports, units that could sit on objectives and do nothing. Um, that's what I would do. I'm also kind of curious on how the idea was handled. You can have 12 order dice in the bag, but what happens if you leave one of your units on ambush, for instance? Um, does that mean that you suddenly have 13 order dice in total because one of them is on an ambush, or does that draw one from the bag? I'm not sure. Anyways, however that was handled, it was a single generic reinforced platoon. Special characters were allowed. It was a red versus blue narrative event, but even though it was a narrative event, I still think that we can do a lot of meta analysis on this type of event, because what happens when you tell people that you can bring a single generic platoon um, and you can only use 12 order dice for 1250? Uh, that immediately sends my mind spinning down the road of bringing some very, very expensive units and aiming for that 15 order dice. And at 1250, 15 order dice, that's some beefed out units. I would expect to see a lot of veterans. I would expect to see some um, medium to maybe even heavy tanks. Um, I would expect to see a lot of armored vehicles. I would expect to see a lot of beefed out heavy units like tooled up veterans, very expensive stuff like that. So even though it was narrative, I immediately start thinking about how to win, right? Right. The order dice spread. Um, the order dice was between 9 and 16. For the Axis powers, the average was 12.7. For the Allies, the average was 13.2. So higher order dice counts on the Allies. But you can already see that people were sort of aiming for a little above 12 order dice in total in their lists, which is what I would expect. I'm not sure why a few people went below, but two people did. Um, these builds were very special, as you'll see in a moment, and possibly didn't do terribly well. I would expect them not to. Um, we had a lot of people just trying to hit that 12 to 13 range, 10 lists, that was the most common. Um, For me, I would have gone a few above, again, just to make sure that as soon as I started losing order dice, that it didn't matter that much. But um, like hitting the point is definitely encouraged here as well. And then we had 4 lists that were in the 14 to 15 range where I would have like aimed, and 2 lists that were in the 16 order dice range. Now, the 16 order dice range, I didn't really get why that was a thing, but I think it's way too high. Maybe they had a lot of units that could just go down on objectives and stay there for the rest of the game. Anyways, the nations being brought. For the Axis powers, there was 4 Germanys, 2 Italians, 1 Japanese, 1 Vichy French, and 1 early war Soviets, which they counted as being Axis. Well, they did invade Poland, didn't they? Again, I sort of expect to see a lot of Germany in the nations for the Axis powers. I did not expect to see 2 Italians. That's pretty cool. The Italy don't have the best national special rules, so they're not. They're typically labors of love. They're not competitive armies. I had expected to see maybe 2 Japanese, 3 Japanese, maybe even the Vichy French. That was really cool. Um, I expected to see a lot of like Foreign Legion, and that was pretty much the build. Lots of nice stuff in that build. Soviet French, Soviet Axis power. Okay, no, fine. For the Allies, we had 5 American armies. 5. So um, that was way more than I expected. 2 Soviets, 1 Partisans, 1 British. I expected to see Soviets and Brits being played, but this is America. I have to remember that this is America. In America, they play the US more than we do in Europe. Um, and again, this was a narrative event, not a competitive one. So there's also a difference there. Um, but again, 5 American lists. That's a lot. Partisans, though, that's always cool to see them. They have some really interesting ideas that you can play around with, and they're so unusual that people often get surprised by them. The Axis builds. The Axis had 2 Soto tank lists, 2 mixed bag lists, 2 Death Star builds. One of them included Wittmann, the Panzer Ace. Now I've actually played a game with Wittmann. He was really cool, but damn, he's expensive. Um, he drives a Tiger, and it's extremely expensive. It also included 2 Horde lists, which I did not really get at this point level. But of course, if you're low on order dice, if you're pushing low order dice down, that will also mean that your units are beefing out in size. So you end up with some of them being almost Horde-like anyways. And 1 Motorized Veterans, Hanamax, of course. Right. No, that wasn't Hanamax. That was Veterans in Trucks, I think. Oh, I forgot. Sorry. Um, the Allies, though. The Allies had 6 skirmish builds. All the American armies, all of them were skirmish armies, of course. The Americans built the best skirmish armies. The British army as well was a skirmish army, all Chindits. So even the British army was built as if it was an American army. They had 3 of them had elements of mixed bag, the Soviet ones and the partisan ones. And then we had 3 lists which had Death Star-ish elements. Um, Again, this is way higher than I expected, but of course I should have maybe thought that that once you get 1250 and you can only have 12 order dice, you're encouraged to build Death Stars. But I'm beginning to see a trend here as well, that in America we see more, or you guys see more Death Star builds than we do in Europe. The Death Stars here for the Allies were all combined with skirmish elements. So even though they were Death Stars, I didn't actually think that they were that bad. I just uh, felt like the points could have been spent better. But the skirmish elements, they definitely work. So that was it. Unsurprisingly, the the the, uh, the Allies won. Um, I think in the top 10, uh, 7 of them were allies, something like that. Um, that is pretty much my prediction. My prediction was it would be an overwhelming Allied victory. I could just see, just from the order dice count, that the Allies knew what they were doing, um, and that the Axis powers had a few of those low order dice counts. But as it turns out, Pat wrote to me that it was actually kind of close until the last round, where the Allies simply knocked it out of the park and just ran over the Axis powers. So, Pat, thank you again so much for giving me this glimpse into American meta. Cheers.